I started this podcast because I'm fascinated by how we get better at bridge, how we reach that next level. I'm talking with expert players about how they got where they are and what they do to continue honing their skills, to less experienced players about what they're doing to improve their game, and to experts in fields outside of bridge, like learning and expertise. If you're looking to level up your game, check out my classes on Learn Bridge Online. Mondays are about the expert thought process, and Thursdays are about declare a play. You can attend the classes live or you can watch the recorded replay. I'm looking forward to leveling up together. I am joined this week by Janice, Seamon, Molson. Janice, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here, Adam.
So, first question, how did you learn bridge?
Well, I had the fortune or the misfortune of coming from a family of professional bridge players. My father was a professional bridge player. Both my aunts were professional bridge players. My father eventually came across a client who decided it was more practical for him. He owned a bank. So he installed my father as the vice president of the bank, gave him a salary and health insurance and a car and a few other things. And that way they could go to all the bridge tournaments. And Dad would sit in the middle of the bank talking on the phone to Al Roth every day about bridge and horses.
So he had a job at the bank but didn't actually do any banking work?
Absolutely none. He wasn't competent to do banking.
And the authorities never got wind of this?
It was Joe's bank. Nobody bothered.
Well, yeah, okay. So how old were you when you first picked up cards?
Well, I was a caddy from age 5. Back then, the sectionals were huge. We had 3 sectionals a year in South Florida. My dad ran one at the Americana, and I would go with him and I would pick up the slips. But also, there were no such thing as computer, so I would have to, my 5-year-old writing, I would write the names and the ACBL numbers of the pairs on the giant recap sheet. And I remember once that I accidentally wrote the last name for this pair. It was a woman and a man, but they weren't married, but I accidentally made them married in the last name. And it caused such excitement because everybody was hoping they would get married. And in fact, because of that, they did. So
you're a matchmaker.
I am the best matchmaker ever.
And then when did you really start playing? You're caddying from a young age. When did you realize, no, maybe I should try this?
Well, I really was about 19 when I got interested in bridge, for real. I was at the University of Florida. One of the bridge playing couples from Central Florida contacted me and said, our son is at Gainesville. He's in a graduate program in chemistry, and we've taught him to play precision because precision requires no judgment, and he has no judgment. So it's perfect, and it would be a great favor for us if you would play with him some. So I didn't know much about bridge, but I started reading and kibitzing a bit. So I considered myself an expert. I basically thought I was an expert the first time I read a bridge book and said, okay, I know more than everybody else. So we played, and he's still to this day a very, very dear friend of mine. And they were right. He had no judgment.
So when did you realize that maybe you didn't know everything? Or have you realized that yet?
Yes, I totally realized that. As I got more and more recognition, I mean, I had like 20 master points, and my mom and I wanted to play in the masters pairs. You needed 50 master points. So we went on, not my mom, but the college kids and I went on a road trip to go to all the different tournaments. In those days, you know, gold, silver, there was no such thing. You just had red, gold, and black. And to be a master, you needed 50 blacks. So I needed 30 points. So we drove every weekend, and we would get to the sectionals and the regionals. And I got my 30 points. But along the way, I kind of said, you know, there might be more to this game than I realized. But I was reading the Times and Tampa, or whatever it was, the Tampa paper, saying Seamon is somewhat of a phenomenon. And I'm like, okay, you know, I buy that. Never read your own press set.
Yeah. What were some of the books that you started reading in the early days?
everything on bridge, but I loved, like Eddie Cantor's books, I loved problem solving. It was much more interesting to me than whatever it was, some number of weeks to winning bridge, and all these other books that people say you should start with. I wanted to learn practically. So I would get those old books. I had about 10 of them. And, you'd read, it was defense, it was declare play, and you'd read the problem and you'd try to solve it. And then you'd flip the page to the back and there would be the answer. They don't even publish those anymore. I've tried to get them.
Okay, so you got your 30 points and the paper's writing about you. When did you feel like, yeah, I've made it? I can play with the big girls.
Well, it was 1975 when I started playing bridge. And I think that in about 1988, could be off by a year, I had moved to Chicago, and a bridge player by the name of Toby Sokolow called me and said, you just played your first national event in the women's knockout. I played on a team of dead people. And I don't mean that meanly. I mean, I got a call from a friend saying I have 6 months to live, and I have 2 other people on the team that also have under a year to live, and it's our dream to play in a women's knockout, and you need to do this as a favor for me. I said, okay. So I played on a team, and we got to the round of 4. And that was in the days when there were like 65 teams. And as I came out, what she didn't call me, as I came out and I'd lost, she came over to me and she said, we've been watching you. We're looking for a partner for Sue Weinstein to play on a team with, some other top names, and we think you might fit the bill. We'd like you to play with her in a duplicate and see how you two get along. So I said, okay. We were playing, and I bid Blackwood, and she showed 1 key card, and I had 3, and I said, okay, 7 spades. And I remember thinking when I realized I was off an ace, they're probably not going to want me. But they did, and we played the next year in the women's knockout, and we won it. But back then, the women's team trials were based on winning certain events. So we now had a berth in the women's team trials. And I remember there were 5 teams entered that year, and they were going to play to eliminate 1. And guess who got eliminated? Me. And after that, 3 trials that I went to between 1989 and 1999, I was one of the first teams eliminated. So I said, there's something wrong because I played too good to be eliminated the first round every time. As a matter of fact, I'd kind of gotten like the yips in golf when you go to. So Toby Sokolow and I at that point decided to start a partnership, and I said, well, we need to go to a sports psychiatrist because there's something mentally wrong with me. So we went to this sports psychiatrist, and he was a golf sports psychiatrist. He knew nothing about bridge, but he said, you know what? The psychiatry of competition is the psychiatry of competition. I don't need to know anything about bridge. I'm going to get you out of this mental place that you're at. And he did. And in 1999, we won the U.S. team trials to go to Bermuda, which was the 1999 World Championship, but they had it in January of 2000 because it was the 50th anniversary of the Bermuda Bowl. So my team went to Bermuda to represent the United States. And that was kind of the beginning. That's when I started getting actual real recognition as a bridge player.
So what did this sports psychologist or psychiatrist say to you?
Well, he said, should I give away our secrets? He said, you need to keep a personal scorecard. And on the scorecard, you write the contract and the result. And if there's anything you don't like about the board, you put a little asterisk by it. Then you close the card and you don't open it again until the next board is done. You are never allowed to look back at anything. When a board is over, it's done. And, and when the whole session's over, you can go in a room. You can start off with your partner being respectful. He said that's usually the right thing to do to get the most out of somebody. But if the 2 of you end up screaming and yelling at each other, it's in a closed room by yourself. You are never to say a word at the bridge table to your partner or your opponents. And of course, I followed none of that, but
So, do you think that had been holding you back
I
previously?
I don't know for sure, but I started winning after that.
Are you someone who has a tendency to dwell on?
Oh, yes, yes. I work very hard not to, but if something goes wrong at the table, you can see me on the next board like muttering.
So nowadays, what do you do when you catch yourself in that situation?
Well, I'd like to say that I don't catch myself in that situation, but I would be lying. And what I do is usually screw up the next day because I don't learn very well. But I try. I try very, very hard to. I actually think it helps me not to keep score.
Interesting. Exactly the opposite of what the psychiatrist said.
Right, because he can say what he wants, but every time you open that scorecard and you see that little asterisk, you're like,
Yeah.
So I try not to keep score, but some of my partners require me to because they don't keep score probably for the same reason.
You have to like draw straws for who's going to keep score this.
Just depends on who I'm playing with. Some of them I'm the boss of, and some of them are the boss of me.
People always cite Bob Hammond as being the master of this, of putting the results behind, focusing on the current board. Why do you think he's so good at it? How can we all live up to that standard?
Well, Adam, now I get to say something that's going to be controversial as hell. First off, I'm sorry. I don't think the average woman can throw it into the back. I think women just are wired a little differently. We're multitaskers. You know, people can say what they want. We are. And men can compartmentalize. So men are much easier to just forget it than women. It's a training thing with women. You have to train. Although I've noticed, again, I'm going to get stoned, but I've noticed women without children are better at it than women with children.
What do you think that's attributed to?
I think it's totally attributed to the fact that as a mother, there is no point in time, no matter what I'm doing, that at least every 5 to 10 minutes, I'm not thinking, is my daughter okay? You know, I wonder what she's doing. You know, she can't reach me. Does she need me? You know, it's not there all the time. It's not constant. But there is this little thing. And God forbid she has a problem. You know, she's learned, don't tell me your problems before I start playing in a major competition, please.
So do you think that ability to compartmentalize explains a lot of why top level bridge is dominated by men?
Yes, I do.
So you think it's physical
I do.
and not mental? Yeah, there's a difference between the sexes, just how they work.
I think so. I mean, and that's not to say that at any point in time a woman can't play as well or better as a top man, but I don't think they can do it consistently.
There must be things that women are better at than men.
Everything else.
But I think of other bridge skills that are necessary, things like creativity and empathy and things like that, that often women do better than men. Like, does some of that cancel each other out?
No,
No.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that these guys who are so focused and everything else are also very creative. I mean, I've seen some of these guys do the most remarkably creative things. You know, sometimes you see the most brilliant things that you're like, wow.
You've played an awful lot at the highest levels in women's bridge, but you've also played a lot of open bridge. What do you see as the differences?
Not a lot.
Not a lot, but you've certainly, played in the big pair games. And
well, I would love to say I can play in the big pair games because, like last year, Sylvia and I entered the Life Master pairs, and if David Berkowitz and Jeff Mextrov hadn't had like a 73% game, we would have won. We ended up second. So yeah, we can compete, but unfortunately, this is how I make my living. And while I can get top dollar in a mixed, I can get top dollar in a women's, I even can get pretty close to top dollar in a seniors. But in open, I'm not going to get my rates,
Do you think that's prejudice, or do you think they're right and you're not at that level?
Well, you can't be at that level unless you play at that level constantly. And when you're a single woman, and this is what you do for a living, anytime you don't get paid, you're missing an employment opportunity. So there's only so many employment opportunities you can miss.
So at the end of the day, do you think having women's events helps or hurts, top women players like you?
For me, it's the best thing ever because I couldn't make a living if there weren't women's events and mixed events. And frankly, I don't think there's any difference between women's and mixed as far as the level of not competition, but I mean, open is at the top. And I'm sorry, women and mixed are on the same level. They're both restricted events.
Do you think in some ways the women's is actually stronger because there's more established partnerships? I feel like in the mixed, you have a lot of new partnerships.
That is very true. Regular mixed partnerships on good teams have a distinct advantage. Yeah, it's true. You get a great woman player and a great guy player, and they're going to be better than your average pair.
Do you prefer mixed open or women's just in terms of having fun?
Well, the mixed is more fun because we laugh a lot. We had a great time in Buenos Aires, my mixed team. And the guys are pretty well behaved. I mean, we had Jeff Hansen, Danny Corbell, and Eddie Wold. And whatever horrible things they had to say about us, they did it behind our back. So we were having fun. But the women are a little bit less like that. They're a little more critical, myself included. But, we do tend to be a little bit more honest with our women teams than we do with our mixed because there's a comfort level. I mean, Carrie Sanborn and Joe Myers are two of my closest friends. Sylvia she's my little buddy. I love Sylvia. So, we kind of will say, that was really a bad bid. Where Danny is never going to come up to me and say, gee, Janice, that bid you made with Jeff was ridiculous. He might say it to Jeff, but he's not going to say it to me.
Is that patronizing?
No.
Is he treating you with kid gloves because you're a woman? I'm not talking about Dan specifically, but...
Sure that on the mixed teams, the guys, would say it about each other either. I think there's just a different camaraderie when it's mixed than there is when it's women.
Okay.
As far as the open goes, I don't have firsthand knowledge. I know a couple of players that do nothing but badmouth their partner and their team mates at the open level, but they do it to everybody, perhaps not their partner and teammates.
Do you think that if women's events didn't exist and everyone just played in the open, that you would be a better player?
Yes, I definitely would be a better player from a standpoint of talent, but I wouldn't be a better player because I would have a real job somewhere and I wouldn't get to go to the Nationals so much. Plus the fact that Nationals are very expensive for the average person. The other day, I paid an entry fee for a team. And I was like, are you kidding me? How do people do this?
So obviously, you've done very well in women's events. You've made, a very good living at it. But trying to be as objective as you could, if you were in charge and starting the league from scratch, would you separate by gender?
Yes.
Would you have women's and mixed events?
I would have women's events, I would have mixed events, I would have open events, and I would have men's events like we used to.
Interesting.
I'm not saying every event. I'm saying, there's room for a men's pairs opposite a women's pairs.
Yeah, as long as the men's pairs is not, the championship thing and the women's is a secondary.
And it never was when there used to be men's and women's events. It was never secondary. Even if the guys looked down and said, we could win the women's if we put a dress on. It was not optional, so therefore they were on the same.
Right. Okay. And you would do that because you think there are just enough inherent differences between men and women that they should have level playing field?
No, I would do that because I'd like to elevate women's bridge.
Okay.
That's
Love
the
it.
only reason. And again, I'm not talking about massive events, as far as I'm concerned, if they did it once a year, I would be happy. And honestly, I'm not so sure the guys wouldn't too.
Why do you think that the women's events, particularly the women's knockout, has lost favor? They had to cancel it because there weren't enough people signing.
Yeah, well, when I started playing national events, I think I mentioned it previously, the women's knockout, first women's knockout I entered had 65 teams.
Just out of curiosity, opposite that, like the Spingold A, was that all men at that point?
Well, it wasn't required to be, but I mean, my aunt and my dad were on a team together winning the Spingold and the Vanderbilt, but women playing in that event, it was unusual, and it got more and more unusual.
At that time you're talking about, when there were 66 women's teams entered, how many open teams were entered in the comparable Spingold?
Well, it had to have been somewhere around the same because they literally ended the same day.
Okay. So they were concurrent events.
They were concurrent events, and they really and truly, when I was sitting out, I was watching the finals of the Spingold playing the same boards as my teammates were playing in the finals of the women's knockout.
Yeah.
That
But a
was
few years
powerful.
ago, when they decided to disband the women's teams, there were like 6 teams entering.
Well, people, when they changed the rules and then they had, and allowed open events, they had some open events opposite open pair games and stuff like that, opposite the women's knockout. And the women's teams, some of the sponsors at that point were coming in. There hadn't been that many sponsors, maybe one or two. And then all of a sudden, some of these other women decided. So the teams at the top became top heavy, similar to what happened in the Open, except the guys in the Open were more tenacious than the women in the women's. They didn't want to go enter an event that was going to be a one-day event. They didn't like to be beaten by 100 and playing against a women's team that they weren't going to beat in 60 boards. Yeah, they could. They have those 4 ways now when you can accidentally beat a team because you're playing 30 boards, and let's face it, you have a bad set and anything can happen. But when you're playing 60 boards, it's becoming a little less unusual, but even the teams that are upsetting for the most part are teams that are actually better than people realize. It's closing at the top of the men. The gap is closing. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not closing with the women.
Do you think we should make an effort to bring those events back?
I do, but nobody cares what I think. I've been pretty vocal about it. I think that the discrimination that caused this event to be, the men's events to be destroyed was because there was a lawsuit filed, a discrimination lawsuit. And rather than fight it, which they probably wouldn't have won. Although I can't imagine if we filed a discrimination lawsuit against the PGA for not letting women play in that they would lose. Maybe ACBL would have lost. They didn't, none of us, including me, saw the long-term ramifications. To us, it was one woman who wanted to play with her husband, and it was like, okay, who cares? Let her play with her husband,
At that point, weren't the men's events considered the premier events? Or are you saying the women's events were on the same level? They were comparable?
Again, it depends on who you talk to. If you talk to the men were the premier events. But the reality, as I said, is that's not true because men couldn't play in the women's and women's couldn't play in the men's. So whether the guys liked it or not, they were both full on national events.
So if I put you in charge of a commission and said the goal here is to bring back the women's knockout, what would you do? You have carte blanche.
I would go to lunch. It's not
Happening.
I think we might be able to bring back the women's border match because these are events that, people could win. I have a gal I play with, and she was leading the women's Swiss team at the end of the first day. It's possible in short matches, anything can happen. So that's appealing. In a border match, it's possible you could win a border match. You can't win a 60 board knockout against 5 professional teams. That's about what there would be.
So how much bridge do you play these days between the big events, the nationals, the team trials, the Venice Club?
A lot. I no longer play at the club. So I charge an hourly rate on the computer and I play every day, sometimes more than once. And I play, I would guess, about 10 regionals a year, sometimes more. I love to play the European stuff, so I just came back from Poznan, where I played the European Open Championships, and the 3 nationals, the trials, the World Championships, It's a lot of bridge. I mean, this year, this next 6 months is crazy. I mean, I just came back from the Nationals, and 10 days later, I go to Denmark for the World Championships. I come back from that. I have a couple of regionals, and then I go to China. The Buffett Cup has been reenacted, and I'm on an 8-person United States Buffett Cup team against Europe and China in a show-off kind of thing.
Very cool.
It is cool, but it's a long way to go.
Yeah. So other than playing, what sort of things do you do to keep your game sharp?
Well, I do. I try online. I can get like bigger fonts, so I can read some of the people's like Larry Cohen stuff, and Gavin has some stuff. So I try to keep educated on that. But mostly I watch. They have almost every week on BBO. They have OCBL. They have these little different tournaments, and I find a table that I think is interesting, and I watch it. I go on the BBO, and they have like challenge hands to play and that kind of stuff. I do that. And I talk to my expert friends. I'm on the It's Your Call panel. And after I send mine in, I call some of my other panel mates and say, okay, why am I wrong on this? And they spend a lot of time telling me why I'm wrong.
And as a big tournament is approaching, do you do anything different with your preparation?
Well, I read my notes every day. And I practice with my partner. We either do a practice table, like Sunday, Migri and I are playing against Jill and Carrie for a few hours. And then the 4 of us are a little critical in some situations where things don't go well, because we want each other to be a little critical. We need that feedback to say, am I thinking wrong, or are you thinking wrong? So that's great.
Who are your regular partners these days? I mean, you just mentioned Migri. Is that a regular partnership?
Actually, Migri and I played a regional about 18 years ago and have never played another card. When the women's came, Jenny Wopert was available, but she had made a commitment to the mixed. You know, you could declare. So we made a deal that she would play the women's trials with us. And if we lost her for the mixed, Migri had said she would stand as backup. And that's what happened. We lost Jenny. We got Migri, which is great. I'm enjoying getting to know her a little better. We were not the best of friends. And, you know, I think both of us are pleasantly surprised that maybe we should be.
So it's a relatively short time to put a world-class partnership together between the trials and the World Championships. What has that process with you and Migri looked like?
Well, we every day do 20 or 30 qubits. We talk most nights. Finally, we got the notes to where we're both happy with them. And we play the Schaefer game a couple times a week when we can. And we practice, as I said, with Sylvia Susan. We practice with Jill and Carrie. And that's kind of what it looks like.
How long are your system notes?
They're not that long. They're only about 45 pages. They were longer. Then Migri and I said, well, maybe we should simplify them. We took off the Polish. We took off the multi. We simplified a lot of the transfer. We simplified a lot of stuff. So we went from probably what would have been about 70 pages to under 40, and we'll know them like the back of our hand.
Where did the conversation start? Did like one of you start with your notes and we'll build from that, or how did it start?
I took some of my stuff and sent it to her. She took her Andrew and some Chris stuff and sent it to me. And we went back and forth. I mean, frankly, it's mostly her using my notes at this point, because a lot of the stuff she sent to me, I was like, no, I don't want to do. And she's much more diplomatic about it. She's like, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't. I'm like, it's gone. It's gone. It's not a problem. Nothing I'm married to.
It says something when Migri is the more diplomatic in the partnership.
That's true.
What about style? Like, how much have you talked about what does an overcall look like? What should I expect for a week 2 bid?
We are kind of sort of not on the same page completely about that, but we are working towards it. That's why we're doing so many qubits. Jeff had me being a little bit more aggressive white against red, as a lot of people are. I don't think Migri likes that so much because we seem to be getting too high, and I understand that. So I'm trying to be somewhat sounder, but we still seem to be getting too high. But we'll get there.
And then when you're at a tournament, what does your routine look?
Well, I get up in the morning and I drink about 6 cups of coffee before I leave the room. I brush my teeth. I put my deodorant on. I always put my clothes out the night before. So my clothes go on and down I go. I don't usually eat lunch. Sometimes I do. It depends who I'm playing with. Then we go to dinner. I like to have a shorter dinner. I come back from dinner. I take my bath. I take my clothes out for the next day. I get into bed and I try to watch about an hour on my iPad of junky stuff. And by then, Sylvia, who I usually room with, comes in. And if there's interesting hands from that day, we discuss them. We discuss people's outfits, the important things. And then I take a melatonin or 3 and go to sleep. And I try to be asleep by 10:30 or so, 11, because it's hard for me to get up in the morning.
So you don't eat breakfast or lunch?
Not usually.
Do you snack at all during the game?
Not usually.
Wow. How big is your dinner?
Not that big.
Is this how you eat when you're at home?
No, when I'm at home, I eat constantly.
Okay.
That's why I'm not thin.
So why is it that the routine is so different at a bridge tournament?
Because when I'm full, my brain is not getting all of the blood it needs going to the brain. It's going to the stomach. So it's better for me to have, a little bit of hunger. It makes me more sharp.
Do you feel that hunger, the literal hunger, when you're at the table?
No, I don't have time because I'm busy feeling it in my brain. I'm not hungry. If I was hungry, I would go grab like a granola bar or something like that. But
do you exercise at all?
Absolutely not. And if I ever feel like I should exercise, when I lay down on my bed, it passes in under 15 minutes. Recently, I hired a trainer, and that lasted 1.5 sessions.
Do you think physical fitness is important for stamina in bridge?
I think physical fitness is, you have to feel good. You have to.
Do you drink at all at a bridge
Never.
tournament?
I don't drink away from a bridge tournament.
Oh, you don't drink at all?
But I mean, look, it sounds silly, but on many levels, we're athletes. We really are. And you have to be peak physical form. The only difference between us and other athletes is they're very, very rich and we're not.
So why do you lay the clothes out before bed?
I do it when I'm home too. I got a little bit of OCD. I don't like to walk around in the morning and say, oh, what do I feel like wearing today? It's too much. I got other things to think about. Clothes are very incidental.
Okay. So, my project here this year is about how one gets better at bridge. So if you were going to be my coach and say, okay, Adam, I'm going to whip you into shape. And I said, okay, I'm willing to devote 40 hours a week to bridge.
Mm-hmm.
How should I be using those 40 hours?
I think that you should have somebody who's better than you, an expert, and you should spend 10 hours a week on BBO, setting up parameter hands and bidding with them. I think that you should try to get 3 experts to play against you once or twice a week on BBO. What we do when we play on the BBO is we take spin gold matches and Vanderbilt matches from good teams, and we play those boards, and we get the comparisons with what the top players are doing, and that's very helpful. You take notes on it. If something happens and you don't like your result, you need to dissect it, either alone or with somebody else. When a bid comes up, even if you're sure you made the best bid possible, if it doesn't work out, you need to shop it with the experts. You can never get caught up in your own ego. You have to be willing to say, this result was bad. Was it bad because of something I did? Let me rule that out. And bridge is a pattern game. So you'll find that as you do that, you're going to be picking up a hand. You're going to say, wait a minute, I've been here before. And I know that last time I was here, I did this, and I was sure it was right, but it wasn't. Should I change, And that's how you get better.
How do I find the point right before it's to the point of pestering people? Because if I'm not paying someone for their time, right? If I'm just asking you, let's say, for your opinion, eventually you're going to get tired of that.
Now, most top players, unless they find the question idiotic, are happy to answer questions and discuss a hand with you. What they don't like is if you start to argue with them. The only time that I get annoyed with people asking me questions is if they now start arguing with me. It's like, you asked me my opinion. This is my opinion. Go away. And then I stop answering questions.
Yeah, I've been in that position as well. That, yeah, when people dig in and try to tell you why they're actually right, it's like,
Right.
why are you even asking me?
Exactly. And the minute you think that you have nothing to learn, you're done. I learn every time I play. If I don't walk away from the table and say, this is something I never realized before, then it's a wasted session. It really is.
But what about people at a lower level? So people who are, intermediate or advanced, and they're looking to up their game. What advice would you give them?
I would say hire me to play online with me. Well, I'm a great teacher, but like, you got to listen. Whoever your teacher is, you got to listen to them. You cannot play bridge at any level, including beginner, if you believe that once the bidding is over, it's done. The only thing you have to remember is the contract. You will never be a bridge player. You have to be able to integrate. And I find that that is the hardest thing that newer players have. I mean, people laugh at me. I mean, my peers, oh, come on. You want them to count suits? They can't even count trump. But you don't have to count suits. But like, if the player opens a spade, their partner bids a no trump, and they bid two hearts, and they get to whatever contract they get to, and now they show up with three clubs, you have to know that they have at most one diamond. You don't have to count. You have to count the player's hand because that's what you know about. And I find it fascinating how many people think this is like, my God, he only had one diamond? Really?
So what does an online lesson with Janice, Seamon, Molson look like?
Most people like to do, depending on their budget, either the 1 hour speedball or the 2 hour, pair game. And they pay me for that. I have set rates by the hour. But once the hour or the 2 hours is over, I go through every hand with them on my dime. Whether that's right or not, I feel like it doesn't do them any good to play with me unless they can get what they need out of it. So we go through every hand, and I listen to every question, and I answer every question. And when they argue with me, I don't get mad. I smile and say, next hand.
How have you found these playing lessons online versus in person?
They're much better online. It's not just that you have the hand record, you have the play record.
I agree. So do you have mentors today? Do you have people that are your go-tos when you have a...
Absolutely. I go to anybody that I think is good. I always start with Carrie and Gary Kohler because I talk to them every day. And I'll send it to Sylvia Shee and Joe Myers. And then I pester Jeff and Dan Corbell and Eddie Wold and David Berkowitz. Occasionally I'll bother Eric Rodwell or Jeff Mextroff, but not often with them, only because they both have a lot on their plate.
Yeah. And you think that's an important part of keeping sharp and getting better?
That all comes from, like I said, I get a result I don't like. I can't figure out where it went wrong. So I need them to say, well, either you should have done this, which it is most of the time, or no, you actually did it well, but your partner should have thought about this. There was a hand at the Nationals, the last day of the, what was it, the Jacoby Swiss, the Roth, whatever it was. This is the coolest hand. You pick up some hand with 4-4-3-2 with all four aces and a doubleton ace of diamonds. And it doesn't even matter how the bidding goes. You open a no trump, your partner transfers, eventually your partner bids Blackwood and you show 4. And your partner bids 5 no trump. Well, everybody knows you can't have any more than 4 aces. So I said to Sylvia, well, wow, I wonder if my doubleton diamond is enough to make a grand slam. No, I just bid 6 spades. And Sylvia said, if you bid 6 diamonds showing a doubleton, you get to a lay down grand slam. Because partner had a hand that filled everything except they needed the diamond rough for trick 13. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, what a great and interesting lesson hand this is. You can't have any more. Can't have, you open one no trump and you have four aces. You don't have the king of diamonds. You don't have the queen of diamonds. So isn't this just really cool? And this is what I love so much about bridge, is when a hand like this comes up and you can say, I'm going to remember that for the next time.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before, but that totally makes sense. If you can't have any king.
Bid 6 diamonds at the table, and his partner bid 7 spades or hearts, whatever.
Well, that's a great place to end it. That's a fantastic hand.
Yeah, I love that hand.
Janice, thank you so much for being here. This was a fantastic conversation. I think everyone's going to enjoy it.
Well, thank you, Adam. I really enjoyed chatting with you.